Hello, everyone, and welcome to TCN Presents the Cultured Pull List. We are on episode 14 of our show, and today we are tackling DC's Warworld Saga Part 2. Let's get into it. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Mike, and this is Luke. And today we are tackling part 2 of the Warworld Saga that I think it came out like in 2021. But if you have not checked out our coverage of the first part, I would definitely check that out because even though like it was kind of more of a prelude or an introduction and everything to the whole story, it's still a major part of the Warworld Saga.
Yeah.
And also check out our episode on Superman and the Authority, because the Authority, really that story is also kind of a prelude to this, and it introduces this new version of the Authority that plays a huge part in this story. So yeah, let's get into the info here. So the second part of the Warworld Saga is covered in this collection of Superman Action Comics Volume 2, titled The Arena, and it's written by Philip Kennedy Johnson, art by Riccardo Federici, Miguel Medonca, Daniel Sampier, Dale Eaglesham, and Will Conrad. The colorists are Lee Luridge and Adriano Lucas, and the letterer is Dave Sharp. Okay, so this book starts out with this pink guy whose name is Lord Premier Theros. He's sitting alone in some alien garden, writing what seems like a farewell letter to the Durans, who are his people. And it's not really clear why he's writing this letter or what it really means necessarily, but it seems like he's stepping down from his position. But a servant kind of sheepishly approaches him and says, like, I have some news. I'm sorry to intrude. And he says, oh, it's no intrusion, and mentions that the servant's mom was his mentor at one point. But the servant relays a message saying that Superman has requested aid from the United Planets, and he plans to attack Warworld. And Theros kind of seems like not super interested, but he asks, like, why would Superman decide to attack Warworld now? And the servant tells him that he's planning to free the refugees on Warworld, and that Superman called them the Phalosians, which we talked about last episode. They're like this kind of ancient segment of Kryptonians that kind of split off and went their own way, but apparently they're being held hostage on Warworld by Mongul. So at the mention of the Phalosians, Theros like flips out and starts screaming at the servant, telling him that like he read it wrong, there's no such word, and that if he tells anyone else about the word, he basically starts throwing threats at him and saying that he will die in the same obscurity as your sow mother. So that's kind of starts showing his true colors there, I think.
Right.
So then we cut to Superman and the Authority. They are on their way to Warworld. It seems like in a ship created by Enchantress. It looks kind of like it was made by one of her spells or something. But we see the Authority just kind of kicking back and relaxing while they're making their approach. And we have Enchantress, Omac, Light Ray, Apollo and Midnighter, Steel, and Manchester Black. So they finally arrive at Warworld, and they see like this dead man chained to some debris floating out in space. And Superman goes out and kind of seems to kind of pay his respects to the dead man. And Manchester Black like kind of explains, like, I don't understand, like I'll never understand it, but he really like values all life like that. And there's this sign on the I don't know what to call him, man, alien, whatever, his body. And Superman takes that off. And then the crew flies down to the surface of Warworld, where they're greeted by this hologram of this hooded figure, which we saw last episode. He seemed to be he showed up in Mongul's throne room and presented him with some gifts and seems to be kind of advising Mongul and helping him. But he tells Superman that he's too late to save like a lot of apparently they already slaughtered a bunch of the Phalosians, and he points to just like this long line of dead bodies strung up with Superman's crest tattooed, or I guess branded on their chests. And he says there's this line that is quoted a lot in this book called "So Say the Dead."
Mm-hmm.
And apparently that's what the sign on that dead body floating in space said. And apparently that was the body of old King Shenlir. I'm not really sure if he was, the king of Warworld or what exactly. They don't really say. But the hooded figure, well, the hologram of the hooded figure says, if you still seek Mongul, follow the dead. So that seems to be what they do, and that leads them to this large arena. And there's a bunch of like Mad Max looking type fellas hanging out in these weird cars. And the Authority and Superman dispatch them pretty easily and make their way inside the actual arena. And Superman addresses the Warzoons, which is the name for the people who live on Warworld, and he tries to convince them that Mongul is their slaver, but they have, he's going to help them. They have the power to overthrow Mongul. And like he gives this nice speech, but right after this amputee guy, which we saw earlier, he shows up and says his name is Chatil, and Chatil, whatever, and he's the most prized servant of Mongul, and that he's served 4 Mongols at this point. And he's the only one, he's the oldest living Warzoon, and he knows that because he slew the others of his time. So yeah, definitely not a super nice person. But he then introduces Mongul's heavy hitters, seems like his warriors, his champions. So we have the teacher, who seems to be some sort of like sorceress, and she almost kind of reminds me of like someone from the Dark multiverse. Reminds me slightly of Batman Who Laughs.
Yeah.
I don't know if like she's supposed to be from there or not. And then we have the teacher, who he kind of reminds me of what's his name? Like I think Ebony Maw or something from Infinity War, Squidward, And then there's, who is it? The orphan, who's that little baby in the test tube thing that we saw last issue.
Yeah.
And there's Darling, which I guess is this big metal suit. And then there's the Unmade, who's this guy with like the ram's horn helmet and the blade arm. And Mother uses some sort of spell to zap Superman. It seems to hurt him, but the main thing is when he comes down, you can see that like he's aged and he looks like he did in Superman and the Authority, with the gray on his hair. And Manchester Black reveals that Enchantress had kind of been, I guess, charging Superman or boosting his power to kind of compensate for him losing his abilities due to radiation poisoning. And Manchester Black had been using some illusion, like his illusion powers, to make Superman appear as though he hasn't aged, though he has.
Right.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to take a second to kind of talk about that, because last episode we talked about how Superman and the Authority seems to have like continuity errors compared to like this main Action Comics story, and I feel like this kind of explains some of it, like, but it's also kind of not super clear when Superman and the Authority takes place. But that seems to kind of account for his physical appearance, how that changes, how he looks older in Superman and the Authority, and then looks younger up to now. But yeah, I'm kind of curious, like, still, like, when did that happen though? Did that happen? So like, was Superman and Man and the Authority before like this even started, and like before the Phalosians or whatever crash landed on Earth, and like have they been keeping up the illusion that long, or there was like this 2-day gap between when Mongul's men like attacked the Fortress of Solitude and when he actually left to get the Authority? So it's like kind of confusing. Like, did you have any thoughts on that, or any like theories, or?
No, because like, I don't know. I feel like The first volume in this trilogy, there was like some time. Wasn't there a time jump towards the end of that?
Yeah, it was only like a 2 or 3 day time jump,
Okay.
but yeah,
Yeah, because then the authority shows up at the end, so I guess it would happen at that point. And then in this one, they're like, "Oh, it was an illusion. We were kind of making him look younger, but he
yeah,
actually is older." But then there's still some time stuff in the Superman and the Authority, like there's the whole thing with JFK and all that.
right.
So yeah, this definitely is attempting to clear some stuff up, and I think it does a little bit. But there's still some other things that
Yeah, it does a little bit, and I feel like maybe it's best not to think about it too hard. Like
right,
the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I don't know, that doesn't line up. But let's just say all the continuity issues are that, and let's just, I guess, because we
exactly.
we don't know for sure. They don't really say for sure. So yeah,
Right.
we can theorize all day, I guess. But
Yeah.
but it's not super clear. But
hmm
yeah, but Superman and the Authority is canon, which I guess some people are trying to say it wasn't canon or it took place on like an alternate
Right.
universe, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Exactly.
I don't know. So anyway, Superman at this point doesn't attack. He actually tries to get like can convince the champions and that, like, they don't have to fight and that he can free them, but doesn't go over too well.
Mhm.
So they end up, the Superman and the Authority end up facing off with them. There's obviously an impending battle, and then we cut to the United. What was it, like the United Order?
United Planets. Yeah.
Yeah, United Planets, and I guess they call themselves the United. Or I guess like those guys are the United Order.
Mhm.
It's kind of like space United Nations, seems like,
Yeah.
in a way. And Superman is their strongest ally, so they're kind of debating, because he's asked them for help, and they're debating whether to send him help, send him troops.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
most of them are saying like we should. He's our strongest ally. When we really can't risk losing an ally that powerful. And
Right.
but then this guy, what's his face, Theros, he starts talking about, like, okay, but if we do send troops and if Superman does win, then there's going to be a bunch of Warzone refugees that are going to
Mhm.
be coming to our planets. And, these guys suck. They're cannibals and child killers. Do we really want them as neighbors?
Right.
But then, like, he kind of like contradicts himself though in this.
Mhm.
Like, it's clear he has ulterior motives, and he really doesn't want to help Superman.
Right.
Because he says, like, well, if Superman is all powerful, then there's no need to send help, because our troops will just get in the way. So if he does manage to free them, then we'll send help then. But if he loses, then we wouldn't want to piss off Mongul.
Mhm.
So yeah, so it seems like he somehow has more sway over everyone else than,
Yeah.
like, it's not clear if he's like their leader or if he just, they just kind of listen to him,
Mhm.
but they seem to agree with him and no help is sent. So then we cut to Superman. He attacks Mongol, and that kind of starts the whole fight. And it seems like Enchantress actually uses some spell. It seems like she takes out Mother for a second, but she reappears pretty quick, and the tables turn. It seems like she takes out June. It looks like she just kind of like swallows her or
Mhm.
something. Yeah, it's not really clear what happens to June, but she's definitely off the off the board.
Yeah.
So then Apollo attacks the Unmade, this big looking dude who manages to just like floor Apollo pretty easily, and then comes over and stabs him through the stomach, looks like.
Mhm.
And that causes Midnighter and Steel to attack as well. And then we cut to Manchester Black, who had kind of snuck up on this teacher guy, and he has discovered that the teacher is the one controlling this Unmade guy. He's kind of like using him as a puppet, and
Mhm.
I guess he figured that out by rereading the Unmade's mind, and there's like no actual thoughts going on there.
Right.
But the teacher says, like, I have implants that make me immune to psychic attacks, and
Mhm.
he also has like this triangle thing called the orphan box, and he says like it holds, you know, immense power, so you better not attack me. And Manchester Black is like, oh, okay, I will, okay. And but then he really just picks up like a broken hammer handle and just starts beating the crap out of Teacher, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
And he says like, sometimes the old ways are better. So then we see Superman and Mongul. They start exchanging blows. Seems like Superman gets a few good hits in, but then Mongul starts beating the crap out of Superman and ends up like getting him in the side with his axe, which seems to hurt Superman. And he reveals that Warworld's furnaces used to be fed by the planets they conquered and the bodies of their dead, but now Warworld is powered by these star forges that generate radiation that is similar to red sun radiation. So not only is Superman already weakened from radiation poisoning, but now this red sun radiation is sapping his powers as well. So he's just like getting weaker by the minute.
Right.
Then we cut to Light Ray, who sees Orphan, the little baby in the glass tube, and she thinks, like, for whatever reason, she thinks that it's an actual baby and tries to go save him.
Right.
But then the creepy baby just says, like, you should not have come here, Leah Nelson. And then Darling, this giant mech suit, just like totally crushes her and seemingly kills her. And Superman rushes over to try and help, but you know, he can't do a whole lot. And we hear the crowd chanting like Mongul, Mongul, you know. And then Superman gets stabbed from behind by Mongul with this kryptonite spear.
Yeah.
And that seems to pretty much seal their fate for this battle. Seems like Mongul definitely wins this round, and the United Planets start freaking out, and they're like, "What? You know, like Superman just got dicked on." You know, they're like, "What the heck? We're screwed." And then this Thyros guy is like, "Well, oh well. I mean, at this point, we can't attack because there's no way. Like without Superman leading the charge, there's no way we'll win. So all we can do is nothing." You know, but then you almost kind of see like a smile at the very end. Like it's not really clear, but it seems like, you know, it kind of like zooms in on his face in the next panel. And it's like, it seems like he's got some weird, sinister motives going on. So, then in the next issue takes place, picks up just like a few minutes later, and Superman and the remaining Authority members are all in chains, and that little dude, that amputee guy, whatever his name is, like, yeah, it doesn't matter too much, but but he starts like mocking Superman, you know, he's like, oh, behold, the master of Starro, the master of Darkseid, look at him now. But Omac, who is in a relationship with Light Ray, you know, was pretty pissed off when she got smacked. So Omac breaks from his chains and starts beating the crap out of a bunch of Warzone soldiers, and Steel ends up breaking her chains too. And they take out quite a few of them, but then Mongul kind of puts them on their ass pretty quickly. And he says that the dead and gravely injured Authority members, their bodies will be used to power the Star Forges. But Omac and Steel are clear fighters, so they're going to be fighters for him, seemingly like in the arena, and or just soldiers is not really clear. And then he says that Superman is going to be like his personal slave. And he reveals plans to like take over the universe. It's like he's not content with just ruling Warworld. His plan seems to be to spread his power all over the universe. And he releases Superman from his chains and tells him like his first order as his slave is to kill this one guy, this one Warzone. His name is Kahijo, and apparently he let Midnighter escape. So at this point, we see that Midnighter is the only one of the Authority that managed to escape and not get captured. So he releases Superman, gives him the axe, and says, like, if you don't kill this guy that failed me, then I'm gonna hunt down your son, and your fate will be his also. Superman just kind of glares at him, but instead of killing Kahijo, he throws the axe, which, oh yeah, at this point they had strung up Light Ray's body,
Yeah.
hanging by chain. So he uses the axe to cut her free, and he says something along the lines of like, this isn't the end for you, and that like he doesn't know how or when, but they will see her again, which is not really clear how he knows this or if he's just being hopeful. It's not really clear,
Right.
but then he gets like hit from behind and knocked out. And then we see Natasha, Steele, and Omak being brought to like this forge, and they're given irons, given chains, which in last issue it was revealed that the Warzoons, like when they win in battle, they get like a link basically for every person that they manage to defeat. So Steele was able to take out two of them, so she gets 2 links, and Omak was able to take out 4, so she gets 4, or he gets 4. I said he, and then we see Superman, who gets dragged off and thrown into this prison cell, and he realizes pretty quickly that he's in a cell with a bunch of Phalosians. And the Warzone soldiers say, like, behold your savior, and they're like, this can't be Superman, but this bearded gladiator looking dude, whose name is Krill Ux, he says, like, nope, that is Superman for all the good it did him. And Superman tries to talk to the people, like they try to, like, one of them tries to salvage his body, which is not really anything to salvage, but like, he grabs her hand, and she, that kind of scares her. But then Superman tries to talk to them, and one of them gives him her name, Usul Ra, and he says, that's a strong name, and you look about my son's age. Oh, and he says that like they look like, I forget her name, but they look like the Phalosian refugee that we saw last issue.
Yeah.
And then he passes out from succumbing to his wounds, which I was honestly surprised that he didn't die from that kryptonite spear stab.
Right.
Especially considered how weakened he is. But yeah, they don't really explain that. I guess he's just, hanging on. So then we cut to Midnighter, who we know escaped now, and he shows up, and he finds this group of Warzone soldiers and ends up getting the location where Superman is being held from them. And then he sneaks into the prison and says, like, he has the cell keys and says, we're leaving. And Superman says, like, no, I'm not going anywhere. And Midnighter's like, what are you talking about? We can go and we can destroy the star forges that are making all that red sun energy, and we can get y'all powered up. And Superman said that he actually saw the forges with his X-ray vision when they were flying onto Warworld, and if they destroy, like, the forges are holding Warworld apart. I mean, holding Warworld together, that is.
Yeah.
And if they're destroyed, then like all of Warworld will be destroyed, and all the Warzoons will die. So they can't do that. And he also says, like, I'm not leaving these people here. I'm going to help them escape. And Midnighter's like, he gets mad, like, what the hell are you talking about? And Superman says, like, they need to decide to free themselves, and he's planning on staying there and helping them with that. I guess helping can convince them, but Midnighter's not happy about it, and he's like, you brought us here, and now you're just like forfeiting our lives, pretty much. Like, you gave us this big line about hope, and we followed you, but you lied to us. And he said, like, do these people's lives like really mean more to you than ours? And Superman said, like, no, not more, but not less. And that girl that he talked to earlier, or one of the girls he talked to earlier, is awake and heard him say that.
Right.
From the other side of the cell. And then we see across the hallway in the other cell, directly across from Superman, is, I think he's that guy that Mongul wanted Superman to kill. Kahijo. and he's just kind of, it looks like he's watching Superman, and then he draws a Superman S in the sand and whispers to himself, "Hope." And yeah, that's where we stop for that half.
Okay, so this issue, well, first of all, for this issue and the next issue, the art style changes randomly.
Yeah.
It goes back to the other art style for the last issue, but for these two are kind of sort of minimalist, but also like photorealistic. So it's like a lot of grays and browns and stuff. Anyway, but it opens with like Superman's narration. He's sort of he has like a journal. He's keeping a journal, and he's basically talking about how he's just fighting and stuff. And yeah, and then we see Steel and Omak is kind of like, it is. I haven't read the third volume. I've read all of this volume though, and so it kind of looks like he's sort of going to the dark side. We don't know how it's going to end for him.
Right.
But Natasha, she's still clearly with Superman, but she's sort of like working her way up in the ranks while still trying to help Superman in the way that she can. And then Clark is talking to a cellmate, and he's like, "You should probably use weapons." He's like, "Yeah, I'm not really used to that." So, yeah. And so, yeah, they basically later on they'll have like a little training thing, and then he'll be coming to useful later. And then they start talking about his family and how he used to be one of the theologians and theologian, and how like he used to have a family and now they're all dead. And then like, I don't know exactly what this is, but he's sort of narrating over how like there was, so basically Warworld is kind of just this conglomerate of like a bunch of other worlds put together, but like originally it was its own world.
Yeah.
And the native species of that original world still exists like deep underground. But every time the Warloons, is that what they're called?
Warzoons.
Every time the Warzoon, they find one, they kill them. And so they found like this one, like a pterodactyl looking thing, and it's their like the last of its species, and they're kind of celebrating that they killed off a whole other species of it.
That's nice.
Yeah. One thing I don't like about these, it's these two issues in particular are so weird because like they have these double page panels, but like the narration, it goes like this way and then down and then up and then down. It's really weird to follow.
That is weird.
Yeah, it only happens in these two issues. The other ones are fine, but I don't know. There's a lot of this happening. I don't like it. Anyway, yeah. So this is what I was talking about earlier. He kind of begins using the guy teaches him how to fight with like a club, and Natasha's over here talking about how she's going to get him some armor and stuff. And I don't know what this is, but over here we have from the Genesis Stone from Volume 1. There's similar markings on the wall, and Superman knows that I think they're called they're blood priests. The blood priests are pretending to read it, but he can tell that they actually can't. And so he's going to hopefully try to read it the right way, and then tell the people what it actually is. And then the two kids that you pointed out last issue. They were fighting in the arena, and they still like Mongul, although they're definitely leaning, they're definitely on the fence about a lot of things with Superman and all that.
Yeah, it's a very like toxic relationship because he's very obviously that they're slaver, but they kind of see him as like their dignitary and savior and everything, and like
exactly, because this whole society, we mentioned it last week, but this whole society is kind of built on like, everyone you kill, like you get another link, but then also you get their whole chains. And so like the more chains you have, the stronger you are. And like protecting people is weak, because if you're protecting somebody, then you're kind of stealing their hardship from them so they can't become strong. But if you protect yourself, then you're becoming strong. And so this whole society is kind of built on that whole idea. And Mongul comes out, and they're like, "Look, we're just like you, Mongul." Like, okay. And he's like, "Okay, then kill your brother." And, and so then they're like, "Yeah, you're not just like me. You're stupid and weak." Yeah, and then Superman kind of jumps in, and they fight for a little bit, but it doesn't really end well for Clark. And then we kind of find out towards the end, we kind of find out a couple of things. Omak is brought to one of the blood priests brings Omak to a place. I'm not exactly sure where, but they find out that is her name Light Ray?
Yeah.
Light Ray. They have Light Ray's body, and that they can bring her back to life. And so at this point, I'm assuming that, I mean, I'm sure that Omak will kind of become a good guy at the end, but at this point, he's like fully on the dark side at this point.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because Omak was only there to like protect Light Ray.
Right. Right.
He
exactly.
didn't. He didn't really believe in the cause or care about it, but Light Ray wanted to go with Superman. So
yeah.
So that's kind of his motivation, I guess.
Yeah, and then it's also revealed at this point that one of the Star Forges that powers the planet is kind of has Apollo inside of it, and so
right.
Midnighter is like, well, we need to destroy that, but in order to take Apollo out of it, they would kind of like destroy the planet and kill everybody on there. So Superman and him are kind of at odds, like we saw last time. Yeah, and at this point, this is sort of them kind of reeling from that interaction with Mongul, and Superman's like, look, it's not weak to protect people; it's actually good. Your ancestors were explorers and like teachers, and they're not meant to fight and kill each other.
Right.
Yeah, truth and justice. That's kind of his whole thing. And then at the end of the issue, Natasha comes and she's like, "There's a message from Midnighter. He's gonna destroy the one of the Star Fortresses." As we'll learn, like he's kind of building his own revolution during all of this. And Superman's like, "No, that's not a good idea. Don't do that." And then him and that other guy who was teaching him to fight, I don't remember if he ever was named, but they escape and they go to Necropolis, which is the city that Superman was dreaming about in the previous volume. But as this is happening, the Warzoons, they kind of break into the cell and they're going to kill the kids that Clark was protecting earlier. But now we get to the final issue and the art style is back to normal. And this is kind of a flashback. So this is basically telling us what Midnighter's been up to the whole time. And then so he kind of so this is when a guy who was like because we learned last volume that there was kind of this group of people that are sort of hyping up Superman on Warworld. They're kind of like telling stories and all that. And so this is one of them, and he's about to die, but then Midnighter shows up in a portal, and he kind of saves him. And there's this moment where like, are you Superman? And he just like throws out because he's not Superman, but it's kind of funny.
That's funny.
Yeah. And so they fight for a bit, and he keeps getting mistaken for Superman, and he's like, that's super like demeaning, and he's not really happy about it. But there's one person in particular that he breaks her chain, and she's super upset about it. But like he kind of explains to her that like, yeah, that's not really, you say you're tough because you have this big chain, but that's not really how it looks. And she'll become like one of his like revolutionaries later on. Anyway, so he's looking for a scientist because he's trying to figure out how to take Apollo out of the Star Forge. And so he finds him, and he's like basically just drags him away. And then we cut back to another one of those guys who are telling stories, and we actually find out that there's a couple of stories. There's one about an Emerald Queen that I didn't recognize, but one of the times he's telling the story about Doomsday and Superman.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there's this one where there's this guy, and he's threatening to kill the kid, but then Midnighter shows up and rips his head off. And while like this guy, he's like talking about, hey, Superman doesn't want us to kill him. Like he's like over here ripping his head off. Great. Yeah, and then so this is the woman I was talking about earlier. She's sort of having her own Superman emblem and stuff. And this is the scientist he was looking for. And this is the Emerald Queen. I don't know what that was referencing to, but they're telling a story about how Superman fought an Emerald Queen. And this is the ending of the issue where Midnighter learns that Omak is with the Berserkers, and that kind of not super psyched about that. But then he's sort of arguing with, I guess this is one of his right-hand men, although we're not explicitly told that, but they're sort of discussing about the Star Forge and if they should just attack Mongul directly or like indirectly, or how to get Apollo out without ruining the whole Star Forge. And then Superman shows up at the end, and he's like, yeah, we're just going to basically he says that we didn't. I mean, he kind of congratulates Midnighter because like you clearly didn't need my help. You would have eventually taken over Warworld, but we need to kind of speed things up because he wants to save the kids that are being attacked in the south. So he's like, bring every fighter you have, and we're gonna go rescue them. And that is the end of that. Actually, there was one more. Yeah, this is Steel in a cell, and she learns now that Omak is working for the bad guys, and then this is the final panel. Superman with all of his people, they're going to come in and fight the guys. So, yeah.
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah, so what did you think of this part 2 of the Warworld Saga?
It was okay. I don't think it was as good as part 1, and I didn't like how it randomly switched art styles halfway through.
Sure.
But it was okay.
Yeah, so you liked the first art style more?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree. Like I like the realism. Like it's not like a bad art style necessarily, but it is kind of bland compared to
for
more
sure
colorful and more like comic booky, honestly, style. Right. The other one, I did really like this. I mean, yeah, I think I really liked the beginning. It definitely seems like it kind of like, I don't know, fell off a little towards like the second half.
Yeah.
But I really like it. Kind of reminds me of Planet or World War Hulk or Planet Hulk. Yeah.
World War Hulk.
Kind of reminds me of that. You know, obviously different, but similarities between, like, I think Warworld kind of reminds me of Sakaar.
Yeah.
From the comics. And
right.
And like the whole arena thing reminds me of that. So I think that's kind of cool. It's a very interesting place to take Superman, I think.
Yeah.
I think it would be more interesting like with the Justice League, but it's also interesting that he formed a whole team like kind of specifically for this.
Right.
And we do get to kind of like learn more about them throughout the story and everything. And so yeah, I thought it was pretty cool. I look forward to like it definitely is kind of like just like the middle part, like obviously, but right. I mean, like, you know, the beginning, like the setup was really interesting, and I know like the ending, like the whole revolution part's really interesting. But parts of this just kind of felt like, you know, a throwaway to that stuff. No,
yeah,
but yeah, no, it was pretty cool, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on this?
Not really. It's just kind of straightforward.
Yeah.
You know, not a whole lot else to say.
I did like, I really liked the characterization of Superman throughout this whole like run so far. Because, you know, he still has all the classic, you know, like truth, justice, hope, you know, and compassion and everything. But he is like the classic, like, you know, badass Superman, I guess, as well. I feel like some comics kind of diminish that to make him seem all like happy and warm and stuff, you know. But, you know, I like that it shows both sides to him in this story. But I also like that this is a much like a darker and more violent story,
for sure.
Which I think is very cool. I like that they don't really pull their punches, you know, and like I feel like, you know, so some comics just are straightforward with the violence and some kind of sanitized stuff. I like that this isn't sanitized at all. It really feels gritty. And like parts of it are almost like Mad Max like, you know, which I think is like just kind of like dirty and grimy, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, join us next week when we cover part 3 of this Warworld Saga, and it's going to be the final part. Before we wrap things up, let's talk about our cultured picks. What was yours this week?
Mine was the first issue of the new Green Arrow miniseries. It's a follow-up to Dark Crisis, also written by Joshua Williams. Yeah, so this issue is kind of this series, it looks to be sort of a story about like the Team Arrow, like the whole group as a whole. And it kind of follows Connor Hawke, Roy Harper, and Black Canary. They're kind of looking for Green Arrow because he's kind of lost in the multiverse. And they run into Cheshire Cat, who at this point is actually Roy Harper's daughter, and they haven't.
It's Leanne or whatever.
Yeah, it's Leanne. They haven't seen each other for a long time, so they have a nice reunite. But then, someone in the cosmos is trying to keep Team Arrow apart because then she vanishes into the multiverse as well, and Yeah, so it's really interesting. One thing though that I didn't really care about this issue is it seems to just have introduced a lot of things and then move through like really quickly, so we don't have a lot of time to sit with everything. I mean,
Gotcha.
hopefully it'll slow down a little bit as the series progresses, but yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
start.
Yeah, it's funny you chose that one because I just picked it up today.
Yeah.
I was planning on it when you mentioned it, but yeah, that's
Mhm.
cool. Yeah, so mine kind of goes hand in hand with what we're covering. It's Batman and Superman Authority special, but it's kind of like it's more of like a one shot, like
Mhm.
like it's connected, but it's not really part of the main Warworld Saga, so I didn't include it.
Yeah.
But it kind of piggybacks off of like one of the ending panels of
Yeah.
last volume
Mhm.
where Superman, it's the same scene where Superman gets kicked off the Justice League.
Yeah.
And Batman, but Batman says like he figured out that he, had another team and he wants to, or he says, "Tell me about them."
Mhm.
So then we get into this book, which is pretty interesting. Like I feel like it should have been more than a one shot. I'm not sure if the repercussions show up later, but like
Mhm.
the main villains in it are like the Al Ghul family from
Okay.
one of the worlds in the dark multiverse, and they're from a world where they took over the world.
Mhm.
And they're trying to traverse the multiverse and take over other worlds.
Mhm.
And Superman is trying to, not just Superman, but Batman got a message about them from like this multiversal guardian type creature, and he's trying to stop them. And he wanted to include Superman and the Authority in that.
Mhm.
But like he's not super impressed with the Authority at first, but they end up pulling, or yeah, pulling their weight and pulling through for him in the end. But I think one of the coolest parts of this was that Batman and Midnighter met
Mm.
for the first time, which it's kind of cool and kind of interesting because they're kind of similar. Like Midnighter in a way was kind of like
Right.
inspired by Batman, and he has had run-ins with Dick Grayson several
Mhm.
times in this newer continuity. So that was kind of fun. But what's also funny is like the whole time Midnighter thinks Batman's like really overrated. And
Mm.
like the whole time, like, oh well, that's not that impressive. That's not that cool. And then like at the very end, Batman ends up kind of saving him, and he's like, "All right, that was pretty cool," So
Yeah.
that was fun, and it was also the whole Al Ghul family was interesting because the main people they fight are actually the children of
Mm.
Talia Al Ghul and like the Demon's Head, who the Demon's Head ends up being like an old Bruce Wayne. So
Mm.
on this Earth, and like it's all like the League of Shadows is very Batman esque. Like all the foot soldiers have like Batman costume, like Batman armor and stuff. So
Yeah.
it's kind of an interesting concept. I wish they had done more with it than just a one shot. Because at the very end, they end up just sending sending them back to their world and closing the door
Mm.
is kind of the idea. So they have no other way to get into the multiverse anymore. But I kind of hope they show up later. Maybe they have, and I just haven't read that yet. But
Yeah.
I feel like this should be kind of like a big Batman event because
Mm.
it's kind of an interesting concept. Having like an alternate older Bruce Wayne who is the leader of the League of Assassins and kind of the leader of the world in a way.
Right.
So,
Right.
but yeah, I thought that was pretty cool.
Mhm.
So that is all the time we have for
Yeah.
this episode. Thank you for joining us today on the Cultured Pull List. If you would like to help support us so we can bring you more content, go ahead and check us out on patreon.com/theculturednerd. And if you would like to support this show specifically, look for our show's tier on that Patreon page. A big thank you to all of our current Patreon supporters. We couldn't do this without you. I've been your host, Michael Malillo, and my co-host is Luke S.
Mhm.
Our logo was designed by Jose Navarro, and our intro was designed by myself. Thanks again for joining us. If you liked this episode, hit like and subscribe. And if you want to check out the Cultured Nerd on social media, you can scan the QR code on the bottom left. And if you would like to check out Casual Experts, which is me and Luke's brand, we have our own podcast, YouTube channel, social media, all that fun stuff. You can go ahead and scan the QR code on the bottom right. Until next time.